Harvard Divinity School.
100 Years Rudolf Steiner, December 15th and 16th, 2025.
Our next speaker is Mary Graham. Mary holds a master in cultural anthropology and is working on her PhD, phenomenological ethnography of the we say Eucharist of the Christian community. Eucharist.
Good morning. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. It's good to see a lot of familiar faces out there. And thanks to the presentations that came before. That was helpful. My dissertation is on the worship service of the church that Steiner helped to found, the Christian community. Perhaps you've been to the service yesterday or will go on Wednesday. I'm in the field of anthropology of religions, so the majority of my research will be ethnographic, but this presentation is based on textual analysis, outlining some of the background research that I've done on the Eucharist service itself. I'll be tracing some Rosicrucian elements in the centerpiece of Steiner's Christology, the Mystery of Golgotha, which is foundational for understanding the service of the Christian community. The practice of alchemy gained traction in medieval Europe through the spread of the Hermetica, a series of ancient Egyptian texts that contained all sorts of esoteric wisdom. And alchemy was then widespread by the Renaissance. The fundamental ancient Greek idea of alchemy was that the spirit within a particular matter could be extracted, transformed, and reinserted into the matter in such a way that it fully transformed that matter. In line with the Hermetic way of thinking, viewing things symbolically, it was generally understood that physical alchemical processes could lend insight into corresponding psychosomatic processes, thus leading to self-knowledge. A group of Renaissance alchemists in Germany were responsible for 3 texts that ended up circulating widely throughout Europe and causing intense popular debate and interest. They can be seen as mission statements, quoting De Vries, promising the reform of divine and earthly matters. They portray a mysterious group of spiritual alchemists, a deeply Christian brotherhood, gathered around a figure named Christian Rosenkreuz. The group was allegedly committed to a path of spiritual development, living by rules of moral conduct and selfless service to the world. Healing was a major trademark of the group. Exactly whose mission this was remained a mystery, so much so that over time, those still affiliating themselves with the Rosicrucians began to be ridiculed and shunned. Throughout the 1880s, Steiner was steeping himself in all that Goethe had brought to the world in his university studies. And Rosicrucian principles are prevalent throughout Goethe's literary and scientific works. This implies that Steiner was quite familiar with Rosicrucianism even before 1900, but rather than affiliating himself with the, in his words, degenerate forms it had taken on since the 17th century, Steiner was captivated by what can be spoken of as the living current of Rosicrucianism. I use current here as religion scholars do. Hanegraaff and Wasserstrom speak of esoteric currents as a concept that points to a flow of ideas and practices that persist through time, with the caveat that Steiner saw the current as being cosmically guided, not just a human cultural phenomenon. We can find traces and signatures of this Rosicrucian current throughout history, beyond the external affiliation with official Rosicrucian groups and structures. For example, in most or all of Goethe's works. The first lecture where Steiner allowed himself to express his own esoteric research in 1898 was about Goethe's fairy tale, The Green Snake and the Beautiful Lily. And he explained this as an alchemical initiation story, consisting of Rosicrucian pictorial language. Individuals attending that lecture thereafter formed the German branch of the Theosophical Society, and they asked Steiner to be involved. In this way, we could say that it was Rosicrucianism as a living current that brought him to the Theosophical Society. And we can equally say that it was also what led him to break away from the Theosophical Society. He began speaking about Rosenkreuz in lectures from 1904, and by 1907, he was saying that Rosicrucianism, in fact, held the, quote, most profound secrets of Christianity. From then on, to quote Peter Self, 2012, he made a, quote, resolute attempt to reinfuse the global Theosophical Society with original Rosicrucian spirituality, that is, the living current. But by 1913, his own understanding of Christ was so painfully different than that of the leading theosophists that he had to leave the Theosophical Society, as we heard in the first presentation. Steiner, in fact, came to see Christian Rosenkreuz as one of the great leaders of humanity. An individuality who incarnated nearly every century in order to help humanity find the Christ impulse, a bodhisattva, as we'll hear in the next presentation. The will force behind this Rosicrucian current. He worked ceaselessly, Christian Rosenkreuz, for the cultivation of esoteric Christianity when incarnated on earth, but also when not incarnated. Steiner considered Rosenkreuz actually one of his most important guides, although he didn't know him in incarnated form. According to him, however, Rembrandt knew him in one of those incarnations. Note how the head and the heart in this painting are lit up. There are several principles that can be seen as signatures of this living Rosicrucian. Let's look at two of them. The macrocosm-microcosm principle and that of transmutation. We're familiar with the idea of the human being as microcosm and the universe as macrocosm, mutually reflecting each other from Plato and then later Aristotle. But actually, this idea was alive in all the ancient cultures, in ancient China and India and the Arabic world. The Hermetica emphasized this principle, as above, so below. And the 17th century Rosicrucians were convinced that the study of the greater world of nature would lend insight into the lesser world of human nature. For Steiner, the macrocosm-microcosm principle was not just a metaphorical analogy, but a foundational reality. The greater world was for Steiner not just the physical universe, but the spiritual one. Interrelationality was a given. We are completely co-constitutive with the world, not only physically. We originated, according to him, from the same cosmic forces as the earth did. And he outlines this in one of his key works, Occult Science. In the lecture cycle called Macrocosm-Microcosm, he explained how the interrelationality between ourselves and the world beyond the senses underlies all spiritual science. His aim for the students of anthroposophy was that they gradually learn to perceive not just the correspondences, but the actual mutual effects that the greater and the lesser worlds continuously have on each other. Now, for the second principle, the alchemists use this word, transmutation, in the sense of transubstantiation, the process of thorough substantial transformation that occurs, according to them, by means of warmth, which they symbolized by the element of sulfur. For Steiner, everything was in a process of transmutation. One of his most often quoted Rosicrucian axioms was that of the Trinity, which is central to their original three documents. The Latin here translates as, out of God we are born, in Christ we die, and through the Holy Spirit we are reborn. This was fundamental for Steiner, and there are endless ways to approach it and interpret it, as he demonstrated throughout his work. But at its very basic level, it can be seen as a principle of transmutation. He saw the gradual spiritual physical transmutation of the microcosm, the human being, as integral to the gradual spiritual physical transmutation of the macrocosm. For Steiner, walking the spiritual path didn't imply escaping our imprisonment in the physical matter. And this conviction is what made him so Rosicrucian. Physical matter matters. Being in our bodies on earth is crucial to our overall evolution. Our physical body, as the vehicle for the ongoing individual transformation, is also undergoing a process of continual metamorphosis. Earth is the only place where spiritual beings can experience death. Steiner said that the divine world had otherwise no comprehension of death and rebirth, and that one cosmic being entered the earth sphere to discover what it meant to die. And this was Christ. What Steiner meant by the mystery of Golgotha was not limited to the moment of crucifixion. This was a transmutation that he described, a process of thorough permeation of the Spirit of Christ into the physical body of Jesus, which began with the incarnation into the human being Jesus with the baptism. This transmutation manifested the microcosm-macrocosm principle in its essence, in that according to Steiner, the macrocosm itself entered into the human being of Jesus, the microcosm. And what it underwent during its time on earth affected the entire cosmic order. For by entering the microcosm, Christ restored the human and cosmic evolution simultaneously to their original course. It also resulted in the restoration of the archetypal prematerial human bodily form. There's no exact equivalent concept in English, so it's been translated literally here as phantom body. Steiner explained that it was this spiritual body that had been corrupted by the fall. And if the restoration had not taken place through the mystery of Golgotha, the intended evolutionary goals of both humanity and the earth would also not take place. Now, to get to the heart of the matter, I'll talk briefly about how these two principles overlap in an ongoing after effect of the Golgotha event. Steiner described this in a lecture in 1911. He said that the most important point of the mystery of Golgotha process was when Jesus' side was pierced and his blood fell to the earth. Steiner saw the blood as a physical vessel for the self, which implies that at that moment, the most divine, purest self that had ever been on earth was pouring itself out and onto the earth. In his clairvoyance, Steiner perceived that not only right then, but over time, since that moment when the earth absorbed this fluid that carried the potency of a cosmic being, that blood has been undergoing a continuous process of transmutation. He called this etherization. This etherization of blood is taking place microcosmically too, in a way that will remind us of Rembrandt's painting of Rosenkreuz. Steiner perceived blood being transmuted in the heart into light that streams constantly from the heart to the head. He said that while we are awake, light is constantly streaming from the heart to the pineal gland and making it glimmer. This microcosmic process, so Rosicrucian in the way it is joining the heart and the head, is being corroborated by research on intuition, which has at least esoterically long been associated with the pineal gland. According to Christopher Bamford, the connection between heart and head, or the interpenetration of love and cognition, was central to Steiner's interpretation of Rosicrucianism. On July 10th, 1906, Steiner himself claimed that it was Christian Rosenkreuz's mission that led him to write the most important epistemological works, Philosophy of Freedom and Truth and Science. At the crux of these works is the union of love and cognition. The Rosicrucian current is also reflected in his choice to refer to what we normally call Calgary by one of its other names, Golgotha. This means the place of the skull. This gives us the image of the Christ gesture of pouring his ego out in selfless love onto the head, or even into the head. It was not until after a key biographical event that Steiner began to identify his anthroposophy as deeply Christian in a Rosicrucian way. He underwent what might be called a mystical experience around the turn of the century, which he described like this: my inner trial culminated in my standing spiritually before the mystery of Golgotha in a most profound and solemn knowing. To the word knowing or knowledge, Steiner added fire, so it became this neologism, Erkenntnisfeier, which gives us the sense that this experience of knowing itself was like celebrating a sacrament. Thereafter, he often referred to spiritual cognition in religious terms, for instance, as cosmic ritual. Drawing on anthroposophy and religion scholar Wolfgang Gedeke, 1990, which I'm currently translating into English, I argue that Steiner saw the effect of the sacramental experience, the cognitive communion, as the same as the effect of the altar communion. But I still want to explain a little bit more how the mystery of Golgotha relates to the Eucharist service. To do so, I have to turn to ancient initiation rites. Steiner saw the Golgotha event as an initiation to become historical fact. But what is initiation? Scholars of the mysteries describe that in ancient times there were schools that offered rites only available to a few, that would bring them in an altered state of consciousness to learn more about spiritual aspects of human existence. According to historian Andy Hilton, early Greek and Latin texts show that the Romans, in trying to own the emerging Christian religion in the first century, began publicizing the idea that this new church was replacing the old mysteries, and the rites it represented were replacements for initiation ritual. Christianity became known as the revealed mysteries. Very clear parallels have been drawn to the mystery rites and Eucharist, but consensus remains elusive as to whether the Eucharist is in fact based on old mystery rituals. Plausible, but still debatable. But Steiner, in any case, stated that the ancient Mass took on the four-part archetype of the initiation rite, as he explains in several lectures. In summary, we can see that guiding principles of the Rosicrucian current, we can see them infusing Steiner's work in myriad ways. We've looked at the mystery of Golgotha through these two particular Rosicrucian principles as a macrocosmic event of transmutation that God underwent for humanity and the cosmos, and that we as microcosms go through in our individual lives through our own spiritual evolution. And we then see these principles active in Steiner's vision of the etherization of the blood, which is an ongoing alchemical process that, according to Steiner, we participate in to the extent that we seek a connection to the Christ impulse, which in his Rosicrucian view aims to unite cognition with love. Ancient mystery schools presented their students with an archetypal experience of death, which revealed to them the eternal within their soul. This archetype became actual historical fact through the mystery of Golgotha, which then became the basis of the rite of the Mass. Steiner composed the renewed Mass for the Christian community with a clear awareness of these building stones. The old mysteries, the mystery of Golgotha is the new mystery, and the rite that embodied it, the original Mass. Thank you for your attention.
Sponsored by the Program for the Evolution of Spirituality.
Copyright 2023, President and Fellows of Harvard College.